figure that out?
When working with, for the orgs that don't invest in training, I found that when we work with staff, a big divider between the folks who are more effective at that, folks who are less effective at that, is like an appetite and curiosity about it. You know what I mean? They're just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go explore this feature and try to figure it out myself. A lot of that happens in the for-profit world and the non-profit world, I find. Is that true in your experience?
Yeah, and I think there's, if we go back to like, how comfortable are you with anything, let alone whether it's a digital or a data system? Are you comfortable just figuring things out? Some people aren't. Some systems just don't seem to work in the way that you think they should. So you could spend forever poking around trying to figure something out, and you might never get anything.
Whereas some training might be like, stop poking at that.
Yeah.
You're never going to fix it.
Yeah.
You need to see a doctor.
To add in, and probably on some of that is, and I wouldn't say this is broadly across every CRM, but a lot will have different functions that have different, they'll be inconsistent in how you do this, what should seem to be the same thing. So you understand how to build an email, and maybe you're a little technical, so you can adjust the HTML and you need to make sure the picture fits or something like that. Like, great, figured that out, understand it. Let's go create an event. Oh, I have to put a banner picture at the top of my event. It doesn't edit it the same way.
Yeah.
Right? There's
I mean, I'll just jump in here and say I worked in software development long before I moved to nonprofits, and I feel like most CRMs, and this is true in the for-profit world, all started out the same way, in that a developer or a couple developers built it for a client, one client once, and then they were like, hey, maybe we can productize this, right? And then they built it out from there.
Yeah.
And so very few of them are built in like a thoughtful, like fully designed, fully fleshed out. It's more like minimum viable product for the ski hill, and then we're going to make it for all ski hills. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think two things there. If you try to envision it in full and then develop it, it would take several years, and it would already have problems with it by the time you got there. So that's probably why they didn't do that. But second, yeah, absolutely. So we, the one that we use for our email CRM, for whatever reason, I assume at some point, perhaps like the California Democrats, like, hey, it would be great if we could host events. And so someone else just took, like, oh, we'll just build an event module and just like splodged it onto the side of a wonderfully working email system. It is terrible. And I'm sure they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to make a very poorly functioning event module in this wonderful email system.
Yeah, glommed on because somebody had the money to pay for it.
Someone wanted it.
Yeah. So the last question I want to ask you is about adoption. And I've been inside organizations and watched them try to adopt CRMs. And I generally observe two modes. One, which is kind of the like guerrilla mode, in the sense that a staffer starts using it and it spreads, slowly creeps like a mold through the organization, right? And then the other one is like the mandated from the top down, and you're just going to be forced to do this. And neither is like necessarily satisfactory, and maybe it's what is the lesser of two evils?
Yeah, as a user and never having been in a super decision-making position, I would say absolutely. Does it work for the people who are going to use it on a daily basis? And maybe that is in a small org. Let's say you have 3 employees, 5 employees. Maybe that's the ED who is the chief fundraiser also, and therefore needs to be, etc. But in a mid-sized org, let's say there's an enviro nonprofit with 20 employees in Vancouver, and they want to, it makes financial sense to use this, but it doesn't do volunteer management. So then they find a tool that does volunteer management, but it doesn't talk to this system, and so you get a lot of conflicting data flows, or no data flows, and then at some point someone realizes this is a problem, and like, okay, we have to sit down and solve this problem that we've created on our own because we weren't addressing a need of the employees or of the users. I would say. So I would like bottom up all the way.
Bottom up, terrific. Okay, round of applause for Brenton. And I'm going to invite Alexis and Elena back up. And we'll do some questions now. I'm going to ask one question to start. And I think, if it's all right, I think probably they'll share a mic and I'll use this one. Is that okay? Terrific. I might stand, so I'm just going to take this one. And I'll say the thing I often say about questions is that they are generally, we invite questions that are succinct, specific, and end with a question mark. Right? These are the things that questions are. So I'm going to ask a slightly provocative question to start, I think. There have been some controversies over the years with CRMs and their usage in the nonprofit sector because some of them cross the left-right spectrum, right? Like, I believe NationBuilder, for example. Everybody uses NationBuilder. And then other ones, like Blue State Digital, presumably with a name like that, is exclusively for organizations, progressive organizations, organizations on the left. Do you think organizations should care about that at all? You can defer, anyone can go.
I'm pretty agnostic on that. I've used NationBuilder for a bunch of different campaigns. It's a tool, though, you know, like you mentioned, in the US it is a controversy. I don't find it's much of a controversy in Canada. The Republicans, I think it was in the 2014 midterms, dumped $100 million into it, and they had something like 2,500 state and races that they basically handed off nations for all of their state candidates to use. But that caused a huge amount of development, and now any nonprofit who wants to pay $30 US plus a month can benefit off of that development. So that's I think a big thing. But then we also feed into the development, which helps Republicans. So.
Sure. Yeah, it works both ways. Anybody else?
Personally, I mean, it did feel a little bit yucky when I heard that stuff. I mean, our organization at West Coast, we've had a campaign-specific website that used NationBuilder for like a couple of years, and you know, you weigh that against the benefits that it's providing, the cost, how it fits into your workflow, and I think, you know, maybe there would be a situation where if a company was known to have like crossed a line in terms of our values, then maybe we would step away, but it hasn't been that big of an issue.
I do think it's very personal, and each organization should value that, but I would say, like, if you're saving bears, would you ask your donor, hey, did you vote right or left? Like, we sometimes assume that everyone that donates to nonprofits is left, and I think that's maybe an overstatement. It's not always true. So I think that you need to be very true to your values. Like, would you accept money, or would you work with someone with these ideas? Yes or no, and then same should apply for vendors.
Perfect. I want to invite questions from out there in the world. Questions, just raise your hand if you have a question. Yes, sir. And then yourself in the back.
Can I ask 2 quick questions?
Yeah, and you can,
away?
Yeah, and you can, by the way, you can direct to anyone in particular, or I can just manage the process.
Awesome. What's the least expensive budget for Salesforce implementation you've heard of versus some of the kind of cheaper versions? And then also, I think we have a concern in our organization about Canada-only hosting of our data.
Yes.
Could you talk about maybe specific solutions I should look into?
I'm just going to repeat the question so everyone can hear. 1, what is the smallest implementation budget for Salesforce you've ever heard of? And 2, what are the concerns about hosting data in Canada, hosting Canadian data in Canada? And you can answer 1 or both of those.
That's a tricky one because I work with nonprofits in Latin America, so I'm sure that when I say their budget, you're going to be like, what? So basically, we have done small implementations for fundraising for $1,000 or $2,000. Again, we work with Latin American nonprofits. But yes, that's like, that would be maybe between 20 and 30 hours of work.
Okay, terrific. Do you have either? No? You go.
Just one thing that I think you mentioned, Elena, is that in a lot of this, like, adoption of is the upfront cost, but problem solving isn't always, oh, let's solve that problem. It's, oh shit, we need X. And that's like, oh, do you have $1,000 to pay a developer to fix that or to make that? And that's just, you have to really consider what system you're doing and is that help available in a timely fashion for the right amount of money?
Yeah, but I would add that a lot of these CRMs have like online communities. So always evaluate that. Like, would they have an online community strong enough that if I have a question, someone will come and solve it for me? I have a very good experience with NationBuilder answering questions, with Salesforce answering questions, not that much with Dynamics. So there's a lot of like Civic CRM, they have an amazing community of developers also. So also look at that when it's not that always you have to go back to your consultant for problem solving. Try to also like, empower yourself.
I don't want to keep being a Salesforce booster, but they have an amazing user engagement model around rewarding, contributing to the community and all that too, right?
Yes, they still have the Power of Us, that is basically an online community where you post questions and in less than 24 hours you always have answers, and they have office hours. And,
Can I ask you to tell that, without naming names, that story you told us before about you were consulting with a very, very small org and they were deciding among some different platforms and they chose?
Oh, yeah, so it's just a brand new nonprofit that was just sort of getting on its feet. And they looked around for some help just to, not at the board level, just like, there wasn't really a board, just discussions about which CRM. And so a few of us volunteered just to help steer the discussion in a way that made sense. And they, after looking around, they had arrived at a short list of 3. I forget the 2, but I knew them and I had used them. There were pluses and minuses. And then the third one that they had, I had never even heard of. I kind of asked around. No one had heard of it. No one had used it. And they went with that one. I think they had a slick pitch on it, and the cost was fairly low on a monthly basis. But there was no group, there was no ready developer. It was you dealt with the company on a one-to-one basis and paid them to fix and to load data and to all these things.
And that, like, it can be so important just to have, like, if you're building a website, to use their example, you want to build it on WordPress or Drupal or Squarespace, because there's 1,000 people out there who can help you in Vancouver, right? But if you build it on Joomla or some other thing I've never heard of, nobody. Pete, you have a question in the back?
Yeah, I just got a question about HubSpot, the free CRM.
Yeah.
It seems too good to be true, and other than like a large organization, I'm wondering what would be the practical limitation for that.
You're asking about HubSpot?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
when you look at all the features you get, it just sometimes when things look good,
Yeah.
no.
Opinions about HubSpot?
That's what I do.
Go ahead.
Anyways, yeah, so I use HubSpot over for my work over at TechSoup, primarily around landing pages, email campaigns, automation. It's remarkable at all that stuff. It's a really powerful, pretty easy to use tool there. I have done some digging into that CRM and it is real limited. That free version can't create custom fields. You can't set like types like, is this a text field? Is this a number field? Yeah, I would not invest a lot of time into that CRM product unless you're willing to go deep into all of the crazy marketing magic it can do.
Yeah, I would think of it. Sorry? Oh, sorry. I usually encounter HubSpot in a for-profit context where it's sitting as a kind of marketing engine or marketing platform on top of another CRM, right? So they integrate with a bunch of CRMs like Salesforce, I imagine, and other such things. And so that's how I usually see it used. And I know lots of agencies and lots of small businesses who use HubSpot. Don't know many nonprofits that do. Another question? Yeah.
The Canada question.
Oh, the Canada question, the Canada data question. Does anybody have any opinions on the? Sorry, maybe anybody in the room too. I'll open it up to. Yes, sir.
So I'm Jeff Doty. I work for, just for full disclosure, I work for a Salesforce implementation partner.
Okay.
So
you can say it. It's okay.
Okay. So we do a lot of work.
Second.
So we do a lot of work for government in BC, and BC has obviously the strongest privacy legislation in the country. Salesforce has a data center in Montreal, and so they meet some of the requirements, and only just recently have they met the BC Office of the CIO requirements for privacy.
So there are ways to use Salesforce and only store your data.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah, but
But it doesn't include all their products, I think. It includes some of their products, but not all of them, is my understanding. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's a really common problem. Slack does not have Canadian servers yet. So I've had clients be like, I'll be like, you want Slack? They're like, no, we can't, because the communications and user data that might sit or accidentally come through Slack needs to be in Canada. They're working on it, and they tell me next year, but.
So does anyone know anyone else besides a partial Salesforce?
Yes, I think that Salesforce has, like, for example, some of their marketing tools would not be, like the CRM can be fully in Salesforce, but if you want to use like Pardot or Marketing Cloud, like some of the other systems that they have, then you can start having, like, they're not totally migrated.
But it is a question that I've seen regularly, and the answer is usually, what can I tell you? We're the size of California out there, so you know. Other questions? Yes.
How common, in your experience with CRMs, how common is and difficult and crucial is API integration between a bunch of different systems?
So I'll just repeat the question. How common, how difficult, or how essential is API integration, jargon giraffe, for CRMs?
So basically, API integration means that the system has like all these like plugs that is ready to integrate with other systems. Basically, that's an API.
Maybe just give us one example of something that would integrate.
For example, if you want to integrate your CRM with your financial system, so that every payment that is made is also reflected in your CRM, for example. Or if you want to integrate your CRM with the system that you're using to track students in classrooms. Okay, it depends the size of your organization. For me, it's fundamental. Like if you want to think scalable, if you want to think in the future, maybe now you don't have the budget, you're a small organization, but you also always want to think in the future. Like for me, integrating your systems, there's no system that will solve all your problems. No, that won't happen. So integrating and being able in the future to say like, hey, what if everyone that was working in like every student can now become a donor and we can integrate that? For me, it's a must.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the integrations have been pretty crucial also with like the website and forms, like I think the email marketing software is also a big thing, and then some of the databases, like the CRM services, will offer their own. So like we were saying, Marketing Cloud, we use Marketing Cloud, and I mean, I actually don't even know, is it still an API if it's from within the same, like the company? So I mean, some of our most frustrating issues have come from those two systems not speaking to each other well enough, or that communication breaking down for the data flows, and you know that Salesforce didn't figure out for some reason that this person unsubscribed last time, and then now we get an angry email from them saying that they tried and failed. So
yeah, I would say it feels like that's a bit next level, and it's problematic. Because API configurations will change. Facebook is notorious for this. There's a few other, just like they'll change one little thing in their line of code, and then it doesn't work anymore on your end, and then you have to like go back and figure out where that problem is and why isn't it talking to, and how long has it not been talking to the other system. So a huge shift in how you can work with your systems across your entire organization, but definitely problematic.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just another thing, every time you have to integrate something with something, try to avoid actually developing that integration. Like most of the systems, like MailChimp, with integrate with Soho CRM, with Sugar, with Salesforce, like try to use the integrations that the system brings, because then you will avoid that, like every time something changes, something breaks. Try to avoid actually building. If someone comes and says, like, I will build that integration, you're like, let's see if there's something that exists.
Yeah,
It's always a bit.
I would say in my experience, things that exist on the seams of things, like the borders of countries, are always problematic. The integrations are always the most painful bits. I'm going to jump in with a question here for Alexis. One of the things I'm curious about is you hire people who work on CRMs. How do you think about, like, does it matter to you? So whatever CRMs you've got, West Coast, is it important that you hire somebody with experience in that particular CRM? How much, like, how specific do you get about those kind of questions?
So I actually just went through this process because our former database manager moved away, and so we were filling that position, and especially not having the transition period for training, I had to become more of an expert in Salesforce, which I wasn't super comfortable with. And so for us, it was really important that the person that we were hiring had at least some Salesforce experience. But, and it was limited because it's really hard to find someone who's got all of the exact experience you're looking for. But I think for us, it made a huge difference because I was supposed to be training this person, and I was like, I actually don't know the answers to half the questions you're asking. So yeah, that was a big challenge. But I think there's a lot that can be translated between different databases. So like, say someone who's worked a lot on Razor's Edge and maybe seen Salesforce a couple times, already that's like a lot stronger of a candidate in my view.
Yeah, go.
We use 3 different main CRMs, and probably we would be able to hire anyone that was comfortable in any of those.
Spoke all 3?
No, just like no one uses Blue State Visual in Canada.
Yeah.
The federal NDP does. Maybe one other, but so I couldn't hire here for anyone with any experience in it. Our Civi CRM instance is a mess, and no one would be able to like, oh sure, I can figure that out. Renzo, you're laughing at. She's worked in it. And then our other one, which one was it? Anyway, it's, people can learn. Yeah, find good people and train them.
Sure.
Just what she said, like if you have worked with any CRM, moving to another one is really easy. Like the vocabulary, like you have contacts and contacts have opportunities, like it's really similar.
Okay, terrific. Another question? Yes, yourself and then we'll wrap up. Yeah.
So my question is about getting staff buy-in for CRM and managing the human element. I work for a small nonprofit, about 3 full-time staff, 8 part-time staff. We are like the Mount Pleasant organization where we're very analog, we use a lot of paper, but could use a CRM to help us be more effective. But there's a huge diversity in technical, digital literacy, and interests. Some staff say they're just technobabes, others are totally not interested at all. And our organization has a flat hierarchy, so there's no boss, no one answers to a boss, they can't be held accountable or specifically directed to do something. And if someone doesn't want to do something, they just don't do it. So how do you get buy-in for a CRM?
It sounds like a lot of fun where you work.
It's not a CRM.
Yeah, it's not a CRM problem.
Yeah. So I'll just try to summarize for folks who didn't hear. You have a small org, 3 full-time staff, 8 part-time staff. You have your as we described, like Mount Pleasant, kind of analog. You got some technophobes on the team. You got some people who are highly resistant to change of this kind, maybe. How do you achieve buy-in? Oh, also like a flat, some sort of holacracy situation. I don't know, a flat hierarchy where no one's in charge. How do you get buy-in for this anarchist bookstore? I'm joking. I didn't. It's fine if it is. It's fine if it is.
I would be lying if I said I'd figure this out, but what's helped in our organization at West Coast Environmental Law has been providing opportunities for people to like sit down either one-on-one or in kind of like a internal workshop kind of setting to go through like the very basics and like, okay, here's how you enter a contact, and then having those resources. So we actually created like a kind of a wiki with instructions and screenshots and like circled things and like exact codes to copy and paste to make it as easy as possible for people who don't have a lot of time or interest. And then the other thing for encouraging buy-in has been kind of like showing what you can do, like communicating the value of having all of this great data and how that will actually help in the programs. So say in our legal programs, like to convince a lawyer that they need to enter in every single client they talk to, it's like, well, then if we know when you spoke to this person, we can contact them and specifically target them with like these criteria, and sometimes, showing that value or like being able to send an email to these specific people in the specific region has been really valuable for like campaigns. So that helps as well.
I would say like find one process that you own that could be successful. Like for me, like an amazing example, like if you find a way to show like, hey, I'm doing my thing, I'm not bothering anyone else, but I'm doing it faster, better, and now I have all these reports, look how amazing it is. And just like not try to push it. If you don't have this like hierarchy organization, so it's very specific for this, but just like for me, in any organization, look for the one process where you're going to be successful. Because then it starts spreading. Like it's like, hey, I also want to do that. Why are you not working every weekend for the report? And that type of things help.
Terrific.
Yeah, just have had fun. If you can find a way to make their job easier without them doing much of the work.
Yeah.
So can you do something that I worked with a union that had some clerical staff, and in this consultation with all of the staff, it turned out that they spent a third of their entire job, like an entire third of their year was spent entering printed off sheets of updating address information for all the union members. And everyone thought that she liked to do this, and no one wanted to take that work away from her, and there was issues around like collective agreement and all these things. She had no idea that you could just take that as a CSV and load it into their CRM, and she didn't have to do that. And so when we were talking through how we were going to fix their systems, that came up, and she almost wept that she didn't have to do the worst amount of data entry you can ever imagine.
Terrific. Yes, sir. You got a question?
Salesforce has a 10 free license. I'm just a bit curious as to if anyone knows, for a small nonprofit, what is the true cost of Salesforce? Because I've been advised that Salesforce is 1 mile wide and 2 inches deep. Because once you start using it, then there's some additional costs.
Additional costs. So the question was, you get free 10 free licenses from Salesforce. You've heard, kind of understood that Salesforce. Sorry?
If you're a charity in Canada, correct me if I'm wrong, but only for charity.
Salesforce might be a mile wide and an inch deep, and there might be organizations might incur additional costs as they try to adopt new features or explore the product. Yeah.
Just use it, period.
Just use it, period. Yeah. Yeah.
I have nonprofits using Salesforce for the past 6 years, and they never paid a dime. The only some of the things can be if you need more storage. So I have an organization that have 1,000, they have 60,000 donors per month, and then it became a problem after a year and a half. But if you're a small nonprofit with only 10 users, it's harder that you will get to that.
Is the storage threshold typically around the number of users, or
it's basically it's the same. If you have 10 databases donated, you will have this amount of storage. It will be the same until you start buying more than, I think, 20 or 25 users.
Sorry, I should have said number of supporters.
Yes, it's a number of records in your system.
I see.
And then you do have a lot of like plugins, like if you want to use MailChimp, well, MailChimp has a cost, so there's other like systems that will connect with Salesforce. But if you just want the CRM,
But if you want to use MailChimp, then that's a different cost.
not for Salesforce, you have to pay a MailChimp,
Okay.
but not Salesforce. Yeah. And there's like at the end of the room, he's the nonprofit user group. The Salesforce nonprofit user group leader is here at the end of the group. So if you have any other questions, he can invite you to like only speak Salesforce in I think 2 to 3 weeks.
Terrific. Good. All right. I want another round of final round of applause. Thank you all for coming and as closing remarks.
Well, mostly I want to also thank, of course, Darren Barefoot, who came in and acted as our